Welcome to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 394 of the podcast. And on this episode, I'm talking about the New York Mets losing both Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz to free agency after the Mets signed Juan Soto to a record-breaking contract last year. I believe we all had the same thought, that every star player would wind up on the team. And what's interesting is that a year later, all that talk is about them losing two of their own stars to other teams. Closer Edwin Diaz to the Dodgers on a 3-year, $69 million deal, and first baseman Pete Alonso to the Orioles on a 5-year, $155 million contract. What's the significance here? Pete Alonso, with 274 home runs, is the franchise leader in that category, and since he joined Major League Baseball, only Aaron Judge and Kyle Schwarber have hit more homers. Edwin Diaz has the third most saves in Mets franchise history with 144, behind only John Franco and Armando Benintendi, and has the fifth most saves in MLB since joining the team. What's confusing about this situation for me anyways is how hard it is to tell if these are two players rejecting the team or the other way around. Well, in the case of Pete Alonso, they have made it abundantly clear they did not want to sign him to a long-term contract. The Mets are not the only team in baseball that does not value a power hitter first baseman anymore. I mean, that's been happening over the last few years. They are not being paid like they were in the past. Nobody's getting that Prince Fielder money. Nobody's giving them long-term deals like 8-year contracts, the type that Mark Teixeira got from the New York Yankees. I mean, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. did from the Toronto Blue Jays, but he's a young player. Veteran first basemen are not getting long-term deals anymore. And yes, there's a logical argument to be made that the Mets are making the right decision here by not paying these two. These are two players who are in their 30s, and you just don't know how much longer they are going to be elite players in Major League Baseball. But on the other hand, you are the New York Mets. You have so much money. You can take the hit if in year 3 of the contract, Pete Alonso is no longer the Pete Alonso who is hitting 53 home runs as a rookie. It's important to talk about the moves that the Mets have made. They traded for infielder Marcus Semien, trading away outfielder Brandon Nimmo, and have signed infielder Jorge Polanco, who was a postseason hero for the Seattle Mariners. These are okay moves. I like these moves. Marcus Semien is a really good player, and Polanco had a career resurgence last year. But these are moves that are clearly not exciting enough for Mets fans to be excited by. And there's already some whispers that Polanco is going to be the Mets' everyday first baseman. That's going to be your replacement for Pete Alonso, a guy who you can pencil in for 40 homers and 120 RBIs. That's who his replacement is going to be, Jorge Polanco. Sorry, I'm not that impressed by that move. That's like back in the day when the Boston Red Sox replaced Mo Vaughn with Jose Offerman. Offerman was a good player, but only Mo Vaughn could provide the power the Red Sox truly needed, and I feel the exact same way about Pete Alonso. That's what's special about him, is he is a power hitter. If the guy you're going to replace him with at best can hit 20 homers and drive in 70, you pick the wrong player to replace Pete Alonso. I can definitely see what the Mets are doing with Marcus Semien. I mean, an infield with Francisco Lindor and Semien can be a pretty good one. I mean, Semien was one of the key figures of that Rangers team that won the World Series a few years ago. But with the moves you are making, you better be right, because you're moving on from guys who have proven themselves to be fan favorite of the Mets. I mean, Nimmo, Alonso, Diaz, these are guys who have produced in that uniform. And I think what the Mets are going to try to sell you on is this idea that they were barely a team over 500 last year, So what's the big deal with breaking it all up? And that's fine, but no one in their right mind thought Alonso and Diaz were the problem. In fact, most believe they should be a part of the solution. I get it, you shouldn't give out big contracts for sentimental reasons, but the Mets should have been way more interested in the idea of Pete Alonso ending his career as a New York Met. I mean, this is a guy who could potentially hit 500 career home runs, and he could have done it all in a Mets uniform and become a Hall of Fame player. Now, who knows what's going to happen with Alonso in Baltimore? I'm rooting for him. I think he's going to put up some big numbers. He's going to be playing with some really good players like Gunnar Henderson, and I think the Orioles are going to be a very good baseball team come next season. But one thing that is really lacking in baseball lately is these players who play their entire careers with one organization. That's how you become a legendary player. And the Mets have a history of moving on from their legends. I mean, they moved on from Darryl Strawberry and Dwight Gooden, maybe for good reasons in those instances. I mean, those guys had off-the-field issues, but you get my point. There are very few legends who have played their entire careers with the New York Mets, to the point where they should welcome the idea of somebody like Alonso playing their entire career with the organization. But alas, I guess that's not meant to be. If the Mets can move on from Tom Seaver, I guess they can move on from anyone. Most fans of the Mets are rightfully upset, but then I think there are some that are out there that think there's some grand plan. And I've heard this idea that the Mets are going to go all in and either trade for or sign Tarik Skubal. And I believe in that plan because the Mets fell apart last year because they lacked a true ace pitcher. They definitely would have been a postseason team if they had had somebody of Tarik Skubal's talent. But what on earth does that have to do with these two players in Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso? I thought the idea of Steve Cohen's unlimited spending was that you can have it all. You can add Tarik Skubal while also keeping Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz. To get Shohei Ohtani or Freddie Freeman, the Dodgers didn't move on from Mookie Betts. You get what I'm saying? Other teams don't have to lose their star players to get another. If the Mets want to compete with the likes of the Dodgers, they shouldn't be moving on from players like Pete Alonso. The Alonso thing bothers me more than Edwin Diaz because I get Edwin Diaz wanting to join the Dodgers because that's a team that won back-to-back World Series. They are in desperate need of a closer. I get why he would leave the Mets for the Dodgers. In the case of Alonso, I think he wanted to play his entire career with the Mets, and the Mets were just so disinterested in signing him to a deal that would take him to the end of his career that he probably grew more and more frustrated. The money in this case really does bother me. I mean, for $155 million, you could have kept a fan favorite player and a guy who you need in that lineup to go along with Lindor and Juan Soto. If you are a fan of the New York Mets, you have to hope that David Stearns becomes Andrew Friedman. And what I mean by that is a guy who did a ton with a small market in the Rays and then took it to another level when he was given unlimited resources with the LA Dodgers. And this offseason, at least up until this point, has to have you wondering if that's the case for David Stearns. I mean, does he want to spend all of the New York Mets money? Or does he want to not sign guys long term just because they are in their 30s? Andrew Friedman paid Freddie Freeman when the Atlanta Braves did not want to, and he now has 2 more World Series because of it. One thing I have noticed so far this baseball offseason is other than the Dodgers with Edwin Diaz, none of the other huge market teams the Red Sox, Yankees, and Mets have given out a big deal, and the fan bases for all these teams want to know what's up. In the past, spending wasn't a problem, and now all of a sudden it is? Yes, maybe you could say that because the Mets paid through the doors for Juan Soto, that maybe they don't have to have another huge offseason, but I don't think it was a big ask for you to keep your own players. Nobody was asking the New York Mets to end up with Dylan Cease or Kyle Tucker. They just wanted you to keep the guy you already have in Pete Alonso and to keep your closer in Edwin Diaz. Winning or losing the baseball offseason doesn't mean literally anything. I mean, the Mets won the offseason last year by signing Juan Soto, and they only won 83 games. So maybe they're looking at things and saying, we do need to do things differently. We need to make a way better baseball team. I just don't think getting rid of Pete Alonso and Edwin Diaz makes you better. In fact, I think it makes you a lot worse. The baseball offseason is still going on, so there is a world where maybe this week they end up giving Cody Bellinger a long-term deal. But guess what? Mets fans have not seen him produce for their team the way Alonso has. This is something I wanted to bring up. Edwin Diaz is basically being replaced with Devin Williams. Producing in New York is not easy, and to let go of two guys who get better during the big moments is not a great look, especially given the fact that we are talking about fan favorite players. The Pete Alonso thing you could see coming a mile away. I mean, they did not want to give this guy a long-term deal. I did not think he was going to end up playing his entire career with the New York Mets. Still, I find the whole thing unforgivable. We're talking about a first baseman who is uber consistent. He plays in nearly every baseball game, and he's productive. On the Edwin Diaz contract, that's where I'm more surprised that they weren't willing to give him a 3-year, $69 million deal. I mean, people were talking about Diaz wanting a 5-year, $100 million contract. With this, I have to believe that this is the player rejecting the team. I mean, there's been talks over the last few weeks that the Mets locker room was a volatile situation. The Mets have to respond not because of the negative reaction to these moves and these non-moves, but because they are spending so much money on Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor. I mean, you need to win. That's what last offseason was about. The minute you sign that guy to over $700 million, you put a target on your back. Everyone is going to watch this team and give their opinions on it. You can no longer be the little brother to the New York Yankees. You need to hit the big time. You need to react to what is happening. You need to do more than signing Jorge Polanco for me to say that you've saved your offseason. I like Marcus Semien. Devin Williams was really bad for the Yankees, so I don't know if I have much hope that he's going to be much better for the Mets. I have serious doubts about whether or not he can be a closer for a big market team. He was really good in Milwaukee, and then the minute he becomes the Yankees closer, he is not nearly half as good as he was with the Brewers. So far on this podcast, I've talked about the Mets competing with the Dodgers. Well, they also have to compete with the teams within their own division. I mean, the Braves have made some good moves this offseason. The Phillies brought back Kyle Schwarber. They're sure to be in on other things as well. I mean, there's a chance that the Mets finish third place in their own division. And I think the Braves are proving that you can improve your team without spending a boatload of money. I mean, they signed closer Robert Suarez to 3 years, $45 million. They bring back their own closer in Rafael Iglesias. They bring in Mike Yastrzemski, and they traded for infielder Marcio Dubon, who is a super utility man. Right now, I am way more in on the Atlanta Braves than I am on the New York Mets. Because with the Mets losing Alonso, they are now putting more pressure on their young talents like Mark Vientos and Francisco Alvarez. Those two guys really need to emerge as stars for the Mets to be a playoff team next year. Vientos went from 27 homers in 2024 to only 17 in 25, while Alvarez has struggled the last two seasons, hitting only 11 homers each, but in 2023, he hit 25 homers. So these are two guys that have shown they have potential. The Mets need them to take that next step. There's clearly more outrage over the loss of Alonso than the loss of Diaz, and that's because he's the all-time leader in home runs for the New York Mets. He has been there for a very long time, and fans are shocked to learn that you're willing to lose one of your best power hitters over $155 million. I mean, if Pete Alonso had signed for $200, I think Mets fans would have been like, okay, that's a lot of money for this guy. He's already in his 30s, but $155 million is not that much for a team that just spent $700+ million on one player and over $300 million on another. The Mets are trying to tell you that they believe that Pete Alonso is easily replaceable. That's how I feel about this situation, and next season we are going to learn whether or not they are right. I clearly believe they are wrong and would not understand if they end up giving Cody Bellinger more than what Pete Alonso got from the Orioles. That would just blow my mind. I do not believe at his best right now that Cody Bellinger is a better baseball player than Pete Alonso. I get it. When people talk about Bellinger, they talk about the fact that he can play the outfield, that he can play first base. I think he's an outfielder. I think this whole, well, he can play first base thing is a bit ridiculous. And also, Bellinger is very inconsistent. I mean, one year he's an MVP, another year he's not. One year he's an MVP candidate again, and then the Cubs want him gone. I mean, he's just not consistent the way that Pete Alonso has been, and that is something that you are looking for in a baseball player, especially one you're giving a 5-year contract to. I mean, if the Mets give a 7-year deal to Bellinger, I would think that was ridiculous. Bellinger has never had a long run of consistency the way that Pete Alonso has. But one has to think that maybe the public pressure is going to get to Stearns and the Mets, and they're going to end up overpaying for a guy like Bellinger. I think they should maybe be more in on Alex Bregman. Give that guy like a 4-year deal. He can play Gold Glove third base. He's a really good hitter. He's had postseason success. He's a good leader. And if the Mets truly have a terrible clubhouse, he could be the fix for that as well. I don't think they're in on Kyle Tucker. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think Tariq Skubal is going to be traded this offseason. I think the big splash the Mets have a chance of making is either Cody Bellinger or Alex Bregman. And I don't think signing those guys makes more sense than re-signing Pete Alonso. That should have been the way the Mets went. What's truly crazy about this offseason so far is that the Mets have lost all of the goodwill they got by the Juan Soto signing. I mean, they were on top of the world after they signed Juan Soto. We all thought, well, this is a team that has an unlimited budget. They're going to be competing with the New York Yankees. Their spending is never going to end. And not even a year later, we're like, wow, they won't even bring back their all-star closer, and they're willing to walk away from their star first baseman who is clearly interested in staying there. It's truly telling that no one thought the Phillies were not going to bring back Kyle Schwarber, but everyone on planet Earth thought, yeah, Pete Alonso will not be back with the New York Mets. It just shows that one team valued their all-star slugger and the other did not. It's weird right now. You can't call the Mets cheap because they gave Juan Soto all of that money, but now you have to wonder whether or not they are good at spending their own money. I think Edwin Diaz at 3 years and $69 million is a lot, but he's one of the best closers in baseball, and 5 years, $155 $155 million for a guy you know is going to play in 162 games, hit 35 plus homers, and drive in 120. I believe the Mets front office think they have a plan for sustainable winning, but the problem is Mets fans don't care about the long term. It's about the short term. You got Juan Soto, you've got Francisco Lindor, you had Edwin Diaz, and you had Pete Alonso, and you let them walk away, and they want to see how you replace these two all-stars right now. Thanks for listening to this edition of Head to Head. I'm Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcast and Spotify, so please rate, review, and subscribe.